Good afternoon. I am so honored to call to order this special session of the Michigan Supreme Court. On the bench today are my colleagues, Richard Bernstein, Megan Kavanaugh, Elizabeth Welch, and Kyra Harris-Bolden. Justice Zara and Justice Viviano are unfortunately not with us today, but they send their regards and wish you congratulations on today. We are all very much looking forward to the presentation of the portrait of Justice Alton Thomas Davis. Justice Davis, welcome back to the Hall of Justice and welcome to your family. A warm welcome is also in order for our honored guests, former Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Marilyn Kelly, former Court of Appeals Judge Cynthia Stevens, Court of Appeals Judge Michelle Rick, Court of Appeals Judge Michael Kelly, retired Oakland Circuit Judge Jim Alexander, Justice Davis's colleagues from Crawford County, including probate judge Monty Burmeister, and 46th Circuit Court Judge George Mertz, who you will hear from later in the program. I'd also like to welcome Michigan Supreme Court Historical Society President Joe Gavin, and finally, former Deputy State Court Administrator Dawn Monk. My colleagues and I are so appreciative of you all being here to join us in celebrating Justice Davis's lifetime of service. As I think about Tom Davis's career, I know that the speakers today will most likely focus on what he accomplished on the bench. But what I want to highlight is what he accomplished as a leader off the bench in building a consensus path for our judiciary. Just one example is Justice Davis's work in 2009 and 2010 as the chair of the Committee on Court Structure and Resources within the State Bar's Judicial Crossroads Task Force. That report has really been a blueprint to move our branch of government forward. The progress might not have been speedy, but step by step, many of the recommendations of that task force have become reality. In particular, it was Tom's committee that recommended creation of the Michigan Judicial Council to, and I quote from the report, provide administrative direction for the trial court system under the constitutional authority of the Supreme Court. More than a decade later, in 2021, the court created the Michigan Judicial Council by administrative order, and in 2022, the MJC released its first strategic agenda. They also developed guiding principles for the judicial branch. For example, the council drafted a mission statement, and I quote, "Michigan's one court of justice delivers justice for all by providing access, protecting rights, resolving disputes, and applying the law under the Constitution." And also a vision statement that reads, "Michigan's judicial system is accessible to all and trusted by all." I am certain that as we hear from Justice Davis's colleagues and family today, we will hear that same language. And as chair of the council, I want to express my gratitude to Justice Davis for his leadership in working toward creation of such an important body. Now, this wide-ranging group of diverse stakeholders has been busy at work tackling big issues like court funding, statewide case management, behavioral health, racial and social equity, transparency and public access, procedural fairness, and workforce excellence. Looking to the future, the Michigan Judicial Council is just the body we need to better understand generative artificial intelligence and its implications for our justice system. Finally, I do want to highlight an endorsement of Justice Davis from one of my dear friends, former Cass County Judge Sue Dobrich. Sue served on the Crossroads Task Force and currently helps to run the Michigan Judicial Council. Back in 2014, when Governor Granholm appointed Tom Davis to the court, in a newspaper interview, Sue said, "I support him and many trial judges do, because he's one of us. He knows what happens in a trial and what it takes." In that same interview, newly appointed Justice Davis said, "I'd like to leave people with a court that works well, that acts well, and that means well." He has certainly done that, and his legacy continues to serve the people of Michigan. Thank you, Justice Alton Thomas Davis. To move ahead with our program this afternoon, my job now is to introduce our MC. I think the best way to do that is to note that he is one of Michigan's most well-renowned personal injury attorneys. But he's not the one of the lawyers that you see on TV all of the time. He is an expert on long-term care issues and has taught at the Michigan State University College of Law, my alma mater, on medical malpractice litigation. And for more than 40 years, our MC has represented clients in personal injury cases and has consistently been named as one of the top lawyers in the field. Colleagues and distinguished guests, our MC, my good friend, Jules Olsman.
Oh.
Turn the mics up a little bit. Those of us who are hard of hearing.
What? Jeff will turn the mics up.
Okay, very good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Justices of the Supreme Court, Madam Chief Justice, honored guests, judges that are here, all of you are here this afternoon. My wife Barbara and I are here to celebrate this portrait dedication for our good friend Justice Alton Davis, better known to most of us, I think, as Tom Davis. I've had some experience in these types of things before, and I just want to say that I appreciate the Chief Justice's kind greetings. They take me back to when Judge Beckering had her investiture for the Michigan Court of Appeals a number of years ago in Grand Rapids, I believe 2007, I believe. And when I came in, I was one of the speakers, and I came in and I was greeted by Judge Michael Talbot, who was, shall we say, given to rhetorical flourish. And when he saw me, he greeted me very warmly with, "Oh no, not you again." So anyway, we are here today to follow in the tradition of honoring those individuals who have served as justices of the Michigan Supreme Court. The dedication of this portrait not only honors Justice Davis as an individual, but it honors the court as a whole, and it is a moment in history, and I'm very, very honored that he would ask me to participate in this. I'm just going to tell you a couple of things about Justice Davis. My first contact with Justice Davis came in 1983. I had a case in Grayling involving a young woman and her husband who were riding bicycles near Grayling, and they were hit by a drunk who was on his way to play golf at Garland. It was a terrible, terrible fact scenario. And when the case was first assigned, it wasn't a question of who is Alton Davis, it's what is Alton Davis. And I called a friend of mine in Gaylord that I went to law school with, and I said, "Do you know this guy?" And he said, "Yeah, I know, obviously I know him real well." I said, "Well, you know, because lawyers always think they're going to get hometown. If you're from Detroit and you go to Grayling, you assume that bad things are going to happen just because of that." And I said to Mike Nelson, I said, "Do you want to co-counsel with me on it?" He said, "For what?" He said, "What do you want me to be, a hood ornament?" I said, "Well," he said he could care less about who you are or where you're from. He will never care about that. All he's going to care about is the case is in front of him. And that case was Williams versus Chrysler. The woman who was killed, Sarah Gahagan, had a very large family, and they all testified. And obviously, we had a very successful outcome in that case. Somewhat shocking because the reason the case even went to trial, given everything, was because it was in Grayling. And the old, they won't give you any money, you know, this is rural, this is northern Michigan, you know, they don't see it the way you do and so forth. But the interesting part about the case was when Justice Davis had his investiture to the Court of Appeals in 2005, Ellen Gahagan, her sister, spoke at that investiture because he made such an impression on that family during that. It was a terribly emotionally charged case, and they just could never get over his degree of empathy. It isn't that it spilled over into the rulings, it isn't that it spilled over anything else, just the way he listened and absorbed everything that went on. So no one ever heard of a litigant in a case speaking at a judicial investiture. That is not something anybody had ever heard of, but it meant so much to her to do that. And I think that speaks volumes about Justice Davis. So as we all know, he's a true son of Michigan, born in Petoskey, went to Western Michigan and Detroit College of Law, my alma mater, now at MSU. While he was a student at DCL, he clerked for the Honorable John Fikens in the United States District Court. He was his court clerk, and Judge Fikens was just an ultimate bastion of courtesy and just as fine a man as anybody could know. After law school, Tom returned back up to northern Michigan, went to Grayling where he practiced law, elected as county prosecutor, then was elected to the 46th Circuit Court, which serves Crawford, Otsego, and Kalkaska counties. He was chief judge for most of the time he was there. He was also, as Justice Clement just noted, very involved. I mean, the list of organizations and things that he served on and participated in is just way too long to list. But what it shows is his commitment. It shows his commitment to the law, and it shows his commitment to the judiciary. That's what it really, he wanted to improve judging in the state of Michigan, and he devoted his career to that. When in 2010, in 2010, when Justice Weaver resigned from the Michigan Supreme Court, Governor Granholm turned to Tom and offered him the appointment. Now, you'll hear from now Secretary of Energy Granholm in a few minutes that she regarded Tom Davis as the most experienced judge that she had ever appointed to the Court of Appeals with his number of years of experience. The trial court is in fact where sometimes said the action is. It's where the people come, and the appellate courts have their own role, but the trial courts are where so much occurs, and she liked that idea. No one was oblivious to the fact that it was 2010 and it was going to be a difficult election. The two candidates who were running against him had been out for 6 months already raising money and campaigning. It was Governor Snyder's year. It was a very, very difficult situation. But he didn't say no because he knew, everybody knew it was a difficult situation. And all the people that are here, especially these people, know what it's like to run a race. It's tough. It's tough when you think you're doing well, let alone when you start out 6 months after the people who are running against you have already been out. It turned into a very vicious electoral situation, which is unfortunate, particularly because it involves the Supreme Court, but that's unfortunately seems to be the way it's become. Now, during his time on this court, in this room, Justice Davis, I know from his colleagues, even people on the other side, quote unquote, that they found him to be collegial, knowledgeable, respectful, and insightful. And you know what? That's what 20 plus years on the bench will do for you. With respect to Tom and his place in judicial history in this state, although they served at vastly different times, Tom Davis has often reminded me of the great John Volcker. So those of you who don't know who Justice Volcker was, he was appointed by Governor Soapy Williams, G. Menon Williams, in 1956 to fill a vacancy, and he was an author. He's the author of the book Anatomy of a Murder, plus 10 other books, and he was a prolific writer. When he sought the job in 1956, the governor said to him, "Why do you want to serve?" And he said, "Well, frankly, I've spent my whole career on fiction and fly fishing, and I need the money." Now, that isn't something you would typically hear about somebody seeking a judicial appointment. And when Williams appointed him, he pointed out he felt that the court would benefit from the presence and the wisdom of a judge from the Upper Peninsula. He really thought that was important. And although Grayling isn't quite the UP, both Justice Volcker and Justice Davis brought common sense and decency to this bench. I know that Tom and Sandy live right near the Asable River, and he is a great fan of fly fishing, something I know absolutely nothing about. But so was Justice Volcker, and he wrote prolific about fly fishing and the importance of it in his life. I know that when Tom was campaigning, he went to John Volker's private fishing camp in the UP. I'll bet there was a long line to get into that, but nevertheless, it shows the connection between these two people. I would also be remiss if I didn't also mention that Tom Davis, one of his closest personal friends, was the great Dean Robb, whose wife Cindy is here today. And Dean was probably one of the greatest trial lawyers in the history of this state. And I'm so glad she's here to not just honor Tom, but have Dean here basically in spirit to participate. I know he would have done an imitation of Mark Twain if you let him. But anyway, I just want to say that on behalf of Justice Davis, his wife Sandra Kay, and the entire family, that we're so honored that all of you came here today. We appreciate it, and you do great honor to him and to the justices of the court by being here. So now I'm going to defer to our Reverend Walter Dawson, St. George's Episcopal Church, who will do the invocation.
Family, friends, members of the court, and honored guests. It is my sincere privilege to be here, Tom, to honor you today. I have a bit of a caveat before I begin, because I had the opportunity to meet your family before we gathered here. And sometimes, if you're a pastor in Michigan, if you live in northern Michigan, if you spend a lot of time in the woods and the lakes of Michigan, you begin to think that virtually everybody lives in Michigan. So when I wrote my comments today, I was thinking in those terms, and my prayer thinks in those terms. So I want to kind of commission you all as honorary Michiganians today, and so I can include you in my remarks. To Tom and Sandra Kay, first, I just honestly want to say that we've come a long ways since our days playing volleyball in your yard on Sunday afternoons. That only goes back about 50 years. Here, reading from the book of Psalms, Psalm 33, verses 4 and 5. For the word of the Lord is right and true. He is faithful in all he does. The Lord loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of his unfailing love. And from 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 34, give thanks. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. I find when I pray that it takes my thoughts to a deeper level and somehow connects me to that very source and fountain of life that through his love is continually creating and sustaining me. So I invite you to pray with me. Given the significance of this chamber and Tom's participation and his 50 years of service in the bar, our prayer should begin by offering thanksgiving for this court, for these capable judges who both now and over the years have given their energy and talents and endless hours to pursue justice for the citizens of our state. We pray for this body and for courts throughout our land, that, dear God, you might guide their efforts to establish integrity and fairness, and to extend your mercy as they work to build a more wholesome world. Lord, you call it the kingdom of God. And today we honor one of their own, Alton Thomas Davis, for his work as lawyer, as judge to the Circuit Court, to the Michigan Court of Appeals, and to the Michigan Supreme Court. And mentioning this service does not begin to fathom or encompass, dear God, the extra efforts he has given in his after hours to so many along the way. Fill our hearts with gratitude for all these contributions. Give him a grateful heart and the blessings, for the many blessings you have bestowed upon him. Of course, he is thankful today for his parents, remembering his dear mother, Helen, who celebrates this year 99 years of life. Remembering his faithful wife, Sandra Kay, and their 44 years of fun and challenge and marriage together. Remembering their daughters, Brianne and Colby, and their families, and their 3 special grandsons. Remembering their close friends over the years, Tom's colleagues on the court, the doctors and nurses and caregivers who have protected him, and remembering those even who might not today be consciously recalled, but those who contributed and helped him to be informed and taught and guided and sustained. A fulfilling life, dear God, it takes a village. And through all this, give Tom, by your cross, that peace that only you can give. And Lord, we will not forget this day to pray for the world about us, for peace. Peace in the increasing conflicts in the Ukraine. Peace in Israel and Palestine. Peace in southern Sudan. And we pray for the terrible number of victims who have been so impacted by all this destruction. We pray too today for those about us and beyond who are sick and suffering, for those known to you and unknown. We ask you, dear God, to comfort them and embrace them and heal them with your love. And we pray on this most special day for all of us who are gathered here. And from this ever-flowing spring where we have been blessed to live, our water wonderland, so filled with expansive lakes, quiet streams, and pristine tree-lined rivers. Bathe us, dear God, in its fresh water. Cleanse us from sadness, from our interior struggles, from our selfishness and our sin. And with Tom's example, help us to prize our lives, to be about building a better and more just world. And lastly, as we gather and pray today, we pray that our moments together will be filled with lots of story. Precious times recalled, fraught with laughter, touched by tears. And as we recount them together one with another, fill our souls and our psyches with gratitude, with joy and hope, through your love, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So our next speaker, I doubt needs any introduction in this room. Judge Jane Beckering of the United States District Court for the Western District of Michigan. Judge Beckering and I have known each other a long time, like since the first meeting of the trial lawyers that she came to as a very young lawyer. She's had a very distinguished career as a lawyer practicing in Grand Rapids with Buchanan and Beckering. She went on in 2007 to an appointment to the Michigan Court of Appeals by then Governor Granholm, and then at the end of 2021-22 was appointed by President Biden to serve on the United States District Court for the Western District of Michigan. She was a colleague and served with Justice Davis on the Michigan Court of Appeals, so she will bring to you today her insights into this jurist. Judge Becker.
Justices, distinguished guests, judges, former colleagues, Honorable Davis, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. When you are asked to imagine a leader, some might envision George Washington standing at the helm of a flatboat as it crosses the Delaware River at night in a snowstorm, as reflected in the painting by Emanuel Lutz. That image is a great representation of a leader who stands out in a crowd and empowers others through their own power. In certain settings, such as, a revolution, this is a highly effective tactic. But there is also a different kind of leader, one who is equally effective and in the right setting, far superior. A subtle leader is one who does not take center stage, who listens just as often as he speaks, who leads through collaboration and effectively communicating his wisdom in a way that makes others want to listen. That type of leader is Tom Davis. I had the honor and privilege of serving with Tom on the Michigan Court of Appeals for a few years before he was elevated to the Michigan Supreme Court. Many of you in the room will remember that in the mid to late 2000s, it was a tumultuous era in our courts of Michigan. There was a battle raging over whether politics had invaded the nonpartisan branch of government. When Tom and I were appointed to the Court of Appeals, he in 2005 and I in 2007, Clifford Taylor was at the helm of the Michigan Supreme Court. 4 of the justices had been appointed by a very powerful governor, John Engler, either to the court or to the Court of Appeals. Major shifts in the law were occurring. Many long-held precedential opinions in tort law were being overturned, almost exclusively on what the media was noting were on partisan lines. We made the papers. We made national headlines. We were in the Wall Street Journal. We were in the Lawyers Weekly regularly. And in one question by the Lawyers Weekly asked of Tom, the Lawyers Weekly described what was going on in our Supreme Court as cantankerous. On one headline, it had boxing gloves. Things were rough, and we were worried. There was a concern, and emotions were running high about whether the court was stepping outside the lines of the constitutionally rooted nonpartisan boundaries. When I joined the Court of Appeals, my colleagues were actively striving not to let politics invade our court. Pressures, nevertheless, persisted. We have 2 partisan branches of government. The third branch is wholly nonpartisan. And there were concerns that spotlights were pushing themselves into the nonpartisan branch of government. For some, it was hard not to feel guarded about whether a proposed opinion may be slanted along partisan lines. But everyone, and I mean everyone, trusted Tom Davis. Having had decades of experience as a trial judge, it was hard to view him as anything but a trusted jurist. When you read one of Tom's opinions, his analysis was always well-reasoned and firmly grounded in the law. Its conclusion seemed the obvious outcome. A per curiam, unanimous opinion very often followed. It is one thing to count to two and get a colleague to sign off on an opinion while weathering a vociferous dissent. It is another thing to serve in such a way that everyone on the panel fully agrees and signs on, even in cases addressing highly charged, politically sensitive matters. I was honored to get to know Tom Davis, and I marveled at how he transcended the politics of the day and was an extremely effective Court of Appeals judge and a highly influential colleague. The most effective way to show you how effective a leader Tom was on the Court of Appeals and how well liked he was is to share with you remarks representative from many of his colleagues who I've had an opportunity to connect with and talk about with Tom. Former Chief Justice Christopher Murray said, "Tom was a humble man, plain-spoken, who always enjoyed collaborating with his colleagues." Former Chief Justice William Murphy. Tom was a wonderful colleague. He was always very thoughtful and collegial and got along well with everybody. He had strong opinions, but he presented them in a collegial manner. I never saw him get angry or attack anyone for having differing views. Due to his having so much trial experience, he had a great deal of insight into the law and was an all-around fabulous judge. I hated to see him leave the Court of Appeals. David Sawyer, former pro tem. Tom brought a common-sense approach to the bench. His colleagues respected him because of his long-term service on the trial bench. They listened to him. He knew what he was going to do, but he was not on a mission. He wanted to get it right. That's an important element you should have as a judge. I really miss him. Former Michigan Supreme Court Justice Curtis Wilder. Tom is just an exceedingly pleasant man to be friends with and to be around. He has a quick mind and an incisive way of analyzing a case. He is kind and gentlemanly to both colleagues and litigants alike. I first got to know Tom from afar when I was an associate at Foster Swift. I wasn't in his courtroom. I was reading his transcripts, and I was extremely impressed with his diligence and his work ethic. Doug Shapiro. Is Judge Shapiro here? There he is. This comes from Judge Shapiro. As a new judge, and even after several years, I've found Tom's innate sense of justice and the proper outcome of cases to be astounding. Sometimes in a particular case, Tom would lay out how he saw it. And anyone that knows Judge Shapiro is going to get this. I know this well. But I wasn't sure, and I would go off and do a ton of research and come to the exact same conclusion that Tom Davis did immediately. He was always calm, thoughtful, a warm presence, in addition to extraordinary intellect. It was a pleasure to serve with him and be mentored by him. He is among the very best I served with. Put simply, Tom brought out the best in all of us. Without pushing or pulling or cajoling, he led the panels to the right outcome. Among the subtle leaders of the world, Tom is a genius because he instilled trust for all of the right reasons. Why? Because he was an experienced trial judge, and he had the wisdom and the empathy to stand behind his recommendations. As he said in the Michigan Lawyers Weekly interview in 2010, Tom believed that the people of Michigan are entitled to a Supreme Court, and this quote came from Justice Clement, quoting someone else today. People are entitled to a Michigan Supreme Court that works well, that acts well, and that means well. He led by example. Tom knew that the greatest obstacle was that the public doesn't always believe that justice is equally available to all, and that at a minimum the public must be confident that they will be heard fully, treated courteously, and be given a fair and impartial decision based solely on the law and the facts, and not on political considerations. Tom Davis was exactly what the Supreme Court needed, when they needed it, even if the political winds and the money behind it were still too powerful. I am forever grateful to Tom for putting his finger in the dike in an effort to restore the public's trust in our judicial system at a time it needed it. Tom has been a tremendous judge and role model to me and to others, but his commitment to public service did not end at the bench. A member of the State Bar of Michigan since 1974, Tom's fingerprints of service have left indelible imprints in many arenas. Jules Olsman shared several with you. I just looked at those where he was the president, the chairman, the head of the board. They were unbelievably innumerable. He was chief judge for 17 years on a court he was on for 21 years. Chairman of the State Bar of Committee's criminal jury instructions, chairman of the Michigan Joint Judicial Conference, president of the Michigan Judges Association, chairman of the Michigan Judges Association Legislative Committee, chairman of the Crossroads Task Force, chairman of the Michigan Court of Appeals Education Committee, president of the 46th Circuit Bar Association. He was a trustee of the Michigan State Building Authority, a trustee on Inland Lakes High School. His community service went outside the bounds of law and far within it. He was director and president of the Crawford County Fair Board. I got to hear some stories. And director and president of the Rotary International Club in Grayling. I can think of no more deserving a judge and public servant to memorialize in a portrait and hang on the walls of the Hall of Justice than Tom Davis. Congratulations, Tom.
What's the matter? No. Okay. Better? Is that right? All right. Before I get to Judge Mertz, anecdotally, I had an oral argument a number of years ago in front of Judge Davis at that time, along with Judge Beckering, with just a great appellate lawyer, John Jacobs, who passed away a few years ago. Just a lawyer of extraordinary skill. So it was a no-fault case. And after the argument, John went out in the hall and he saw a friend of his who watched the argument. He said, in front of Davis and Jane, and he said, how do you think I did? He goes, oh, you did great. You're going to get your rear end kicked up to your head like it was a hat. Don't worry about it. So our next speaker is a successor to Justice Davis in the 46th Court in Grayling, and that's Judge George Mertz, who actually when he finished law school and he was waiting for the bar results, he went to Grayling and he became Judge Davis's clerk and Judge Murphy's clerk as well while he was waiting for the bar exam results, and then stayed on after in the community. He worked with Plunkett and Cooney, had a very distinguished career in practice. In 2013, he was appointed by Governor Snyder to fill the vacancy created by the passing of Judge Murphy. And you know, when you organize one of these things, the question is who do you ask to speak? Who do you want to speak at it? And you know, obviously besides myself. And I asked Tom, and he thought that Judge Mertz was absolutely somebody he wanted to have here. So without further ado.
Thank you and good afternoon, Supreme Court Justices, all our honored and distinguished guests, Justice Davis and family. Very honored to be here today. As Mr. Olsman indicated, when I first passed the bar, Judge Davis was the one who swore me into the practice of law, and then later on, he swore me in as a judge at my investiture. And so it really is, it means a lot to me personally to be able to be here today and be part of this ceremony and part of a milestone in his career. I was asked to speak about my experience with him serving as his law clerk when he was a trial judge in Crawford County, and any discussion about my experience with him as a law clerk has to start with this story. Some of you may have heard it before. He's probably tired of hearing it, but I love telling it because it encapsulates how I kicked off my career as a law clerk. I was just getting started. He gave me a motion for summary disposition to research. I was very nervous. I wanted to make a good impression, so I spent a couple days researching this motion. I read and reread all the briefs and all the case law. I had pages of handwritten notes. And finally, the hour came. He called me into his office, and he said, "All right, I want you to tell me about this motion." And so I sat down across from him, and he was sitting there. He had his hands crossed, leaning over his desk. His glasses were kind of down on his nose. He was looking over. He's got this big gold ring glinting off the sunlight, filtering through the window at me. And I started talking, and I started talking and talking, and I wasn't getting much reaction. And I started to hear that voice in your head that says, "This is not going well." So I started talking faster and faster, and getting more and more nervous, and at one point he said, "George, just stop. It had been a couple minutes. And he said, "I've sat here, and I've listened to everything that you've had to say, and I have to tell you, I don't have a clue what the heck you're talking about." He said, "Just take a deep breath," in this real calm voice. He said, "Just take a deep breath, slow down, and just tell me what this case is about." And I did that, and things went much better, of course, after that. But that was the first of many lessons that I learned from Justice Davis as his law clerk and after that. And he truly has been a mentor to me over the years. And as a law clerk and just getting started as a young attorney, I learned lessons like how a lawyer should look and act in court. And after hearings, we would meet in chambers, and he would point out the lawyers that made good arguments or had proper courtroom decorum and those that didn't. And he wasn't doing that to criticize the lawyers. He was doing that because he wanted me to see the difference and know how I should carry myself once I started practicing. There were a few times where I made mistakes and I wasn't as prepared as I should have been to advise him about particular motions or issues. And when he addressed those times with me, he always did it from the standpoint of making me understand how important it was to be ready, to be prepared, because he was depending on me just like my clients would someday depend on me to be ready and be prepared, and that what I did was going to be of serious consequence. I also learned just by watching him, I admired his demeanor on the bench, how he treated lawyers and litigants with patience and respect, even during difficult and contentious hearings. His intelligence and ability to reason out complex legal issues and then give incredibly detailed and cogent rulings from the bench with little or no notes, which always amazed me to watch him do that. I also saw how hard he worked behind the scenes on the business of the court and how dedicated he was to improving not only his own court in the 46th Circuit, but the judiciary as a whole. And the time that he spent traveling to Lansing and other places to serve on those various committees and task forces and commissions and the Judges Association that Judge Beckering mentioned. And that showed me that there was also a bigger picture, that lawyers and judges needed to work for change on a statewide level that would result in improvements for the legal system overall. I'm also thankful that outside of work, I got to know Justice Davis on a personal level through our mutual love for fly fishing and being on the river. And I gained many insights from what seemed like just idle conversations sitting on a riverbank waiting for mayflies to hatch or a trout to rise. And a lot of times we had a lot of time to have those conversations. There wasn't much going on. And you know, so many times I would get home and I'd tell my wife, Amy, who's here in the back of the room along with my son, George, I would get home and I would tell her about, you know, Judge Davis told me this story that I just really enjoyed listening to tonight, or he shared this thought with me that really made me think about something. And just those little thoughts or insights about life that he shared during those times that really made me respect and admire him as a person and not just as a judge. When I moved on to practice and then became a judge myself, he continued to support and guide me in adjusting to the role of a judge. You know, he reminded me to take things slow, to get it right, to prepare ahead of time. As he said, to always remain serene on the mountaintop. And I have to admit, I had to employ that advice earlier today during a PPO hearing this morning. So I'm still using that advice. Many other bits of advice that I use nearly every day. And he also encouraged me to get involved in judicial organizations and to work on improving the justice system and not merely just be a cog in the wheel as I went through my career. And getting back to the idea of mentor, the term mentor is generally defined as a trusted advisor or a teacher. I think it's more than that. I think mentors are leaders themselves. They're unique people who use their gifts to support, inspire, and guide those that they lead in order to form them into future leaders. And Justice Davis certainly fulfilled that role for me. And he made a tremendous difference in my life, in my career. And he's someone that I greatly admire and try to emulate. And I know that he made me a better lawyer and a better judge. But I'm not alone. Countless lawyers and judges, many of whom are in this room right now, can tell very similar stories to the ones that I'm telling. Justice Davis has made innumerable positive contributions to the judiciary at every level, and also to the practice of law in Michigan. And we've heard about some of those, and we'll hear about more as we go through the afternoon. But I think among the most important of his accomplishments is his willingness to be a mentor to me and to so many others. The way that he used his unique legal skills, knowledge, and wisdom to support, inspire, and guide so many lawyers and judges to become leaders like he is, to support, inspire, and guide us to have the same dedication to justice that he has, and hopefully someday to have the same kind of impact that he has had on the practice of law in Michigan. And congratulations, Justice Davis, on the unveiling of your portrait today.
So I don't think our next speaker needs much introduction. She's honored us with a video today. It's Secretary of Energy Granholm, formerly Governor Granholm, who, as you heard earlier, was the person who appointed Tom Davis first to the Court of Appeals and then to the Michigan Supreme Court.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate today by video. I'm so sorry that I can't be there with you in person. So 13 years ago, almost 14 years ago, on August 26, 2010, when I appointed then Judge Alton Davis to the Michigan Supreme Court, he was the most experienced jurist that I had ever appointed to the bench. Obviously, he was a trial judge in the 46th Circuit, Judicial Circuit for 21 years, 17 years of those the chief judge. He was on the Court of Appeals for 5 years. Of course, I was happy to have appointed him in 2005 there. And I urged my then appointees to the bench to live up to three values. The first was no black robe-itis. Please recognize that you are working for the people who come before you, and for those who will be affected by your decisions. The second was to be an example of honor and of excellence. And the third was to stay engaged in the community, to remember where you come from. In fact, Alton Davis never left Grayling in northern Michigan. He has stayed true to his roots. In fact, he did all three of these things that I asked judges when I appointed them. And I remember, Justice Davis, when I appointed you, I recalled people who said about you that in the midst of conflict, Judge Davis is always the grown-up in the room. I spoke about your collegiality and your gravitas and your steady hand. And it was true then, and I know it has been true throughout your entire career. I'm so honored to have been a part of your past, to have been able to nominate you for both the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And while your Supreme Court tenure was cut short by the politics of the day, throughout your long judicial career, you've always demonstrated the wisdom of Solomon and the patience of Job and the decency of Joseph. Michigan's judiciary is so much better because of your example. Congratulations on this portrait and on a life that is worthy of it. All the best to you. Thank you so much.
Of everything you've heard today about Tom Davis, I think this next speaker, I think, says the most, if you will, about his humility. Frank McLaughlin was his, what he calls, elbow clerk when he was in the Court of Appeals for the 5-year tenure. And that to him, that meant the person who was there with him for everything, told him what to do, told him what to say, how to run it, what to do, and how to manage the job of being a Michigan Court of Appeals judge. Because you've heard so much about his tenure as a trial court judge, but here he is in a whole new environment in 2005, and where now you're not just the sole person making the decision, but now you're in a position where, as has been said, the most important job of a judge on the Michigan Court of Appeals is to count to 2, because if you can't do that, your last name will end in dissent. And so I think it speaks volumes that Tom said he wanted Frank to participate in today's ceremony. So.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm Frank Carlisle McLaughlin, and I had the immensely good fortune to be hired by then Judge Davis as his law clerk when he was appointed to the Court of Appeals in 2005. Being a law clerk is a very privileged position in many ways, one of which is that you're really behind the scenes or behind the curtain in ways that nobody else can be. After all, anybody can put out a press release, but it's very difficult to pretend to be someone you're not to anyone with whom you're working closely. And to my great fortune, we did indeed work very closely together. So I wanted to share a little bit about who he was behind the scenes. And originally I was going to say spoiler alert here, but I think it's been well and truly spoiled already. He really was as thoughtful and kind and generous as his press releases made him out to be. Back in 2005, when then Judge Davis hired me, my law career so far consisted of a few years in Court of Appeals research, and judges were still mysterious, otherworldly beings who I presumed probably had some human-like traits, but I couldn't prove it. So I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, and happily, Justice Davis turned out to be a real-life human being, and just as importantly, one who treated everybody else like one as well. Now, admittedly, by that point, this wasn't much of a surprise because my interview turned out to be accompanying him down to the loading dock for a cigarette and a very enjoyable discussion about legal philosophy and writing, which would turn out to be pretty indicative of his personality. He always treated me like someone whose opinions and thoughts actually mattered. He very kindly called me his law department, which was really just an example of how generous he was, because I wasn't just off in a corner somewhere with a stack of paper and books. He was very much involved in everything that happened in the office, and that's despite all the many other fires that he had running, as Judge Beckering pointed out. I'm happy to say that I spent our entire time together learning from him. It took me a little while to realize just how much wisdom he really had to offer, because he was never overbearing or pretentious about it. And he didn't just treat me like that. He never talked to anybody like they were beneath him. He treated everybody like they mattered. And I think the fact that it wasn't just an act is part of what made him so effective, beyond just being a good person. He had a very low-key and calm way of dealing with people, even when he disagreed with someone. He could make them feel like they'd been heard. He wanted losing parties to be able to understand the reasoning behind a decision that didn't go in their favor, even if they didn't like it. He brought the same approach to his interactions with everybody, whether it was me or another judge or really anyone at all. If he disagreed with you, you'd never leave the room feeling like you hadn't been heard out, even if he was criticizing you for something. He'd never do so without at least mixing in a little bit of genuine praise. And that's one of the many things that I tried to learn from him and put into effect myself, and so I can only imagine how challenging that was. So I don't think it's a great secret that in 2010, when Justice Davis was appointed to the Supreme Court, there was a certain amount of personal animosity between the justices, and that was something we all hoped could be repaired. There unfortunately wasn't a whole lot of time to do that. But even in that brief time, it still seemed, at least from my perspective, that some of his courteousness and civility rubbed off, which is not much of a surprise because I don't see how it couldn't have done anything else. One of the other behind-the-scenes details that I think is important is that he believed strongly that judges are there to decide cases, not to be what he called lobbyists wearing robes. And he actually meant that. One of the things he told me at the outset that really stuck with me, and this might have been out at the loading dock, is that if he had any kind of bias, it was only in favor of people getting their day in court, where they'd at least get the chance to have their story heard and to be taken seriously. Which is not to say he didn't care about the outcome, he very much did. These were people's lives, not just abstract problems or pieces of paper. The famous Judge Learned Hand is supposed to have once remarked that as a litigant, he should dread a lawsuit beyond almost anything short of sickness and death. Justice Davis believed that to be unjust, and he had a dream of political issues being resolved by the people instead of by the courts, and the courts being meaningfully accessible to everyone for the people to resolve lawsuits. Those lawsuits should be resolved justly and fairly, but ultimately the outcome had to be dictated by the law, as it is, and by the facts as they were presented. Which is very easy to say, but it's hard to live up to many ideals. But beyond everything that made Justice Davis such a great jurist and a great boss, he also actually cared about me as a person. We had great conversations, and not just about the law, but also about our lives and our families. My only real regret about our time together is that I'm not much of a fly fisher. Alas. He wasn't just a great jurist who Michigan deserved, but he was also a great leader, a great boss, a great teacher, and I'm infinitely grateful to say, a great friend. Thank you.
So it looks like the Secretary's video has been canceled, as they say, but we're not going to listen to it on your phone, Sandra.
I have a speaker.
Anyway, the next two speakers, perhaps more than any two people in this room, in terms of having influence on Tom Davis are his daughters, Breon and Colby, and they are here today to participate and give you some insights into their father and this great jurist. Now, you got a lot of competition. You heard all this. I don't know. Should have quit right after Judge Beckering, but please step up and give us your insights.
We'll just be really loud. Welcome, everyone. When I found out that we were going to have to speak today, my first instinct was to dig up what we wrote for our dad's investiture to the Court of Appeals and zhuzh it up a little bit. Then I realized that that was so long ago that the cloud didn't exist yet and our documents weren't stored online. Which then got me thinking about all the other things that hadn't happened yet or didn't exist the last time we were here.
Colby was in her first year of graduate school at Notre Dame. I was living in Traverse City keeping up with Benjamin, a just-turned 2-year-old, and my parents started living in Lansing full-time. It was before the cabin on Lake Margrethe became a home to my mom and dad. It was before my sister and brother-in-law Tim were even a thing. Benjamin had yet to learn how to fish, and for those of you who know, you know that was a very long time ago. And well before Jack and Gus, my nephews, were even an idea in the universe.
It's been almost 20 years, which I actually had to Google because I found it hard to believe, but it is true because Benjamin is turning 20 this fall. Part of the reason it's taken us so long to get here is because our dad was hoping to ride off into the sunset without any fanfare. But after a decade of pestering, he gave in, and here we all are. Today is about celebrating the professional accomplishments of a man who has had a lifetime of them. But we're here because in all those years of serving on the bench, there was a family supporting him and growing along with him.
While it looks different from when we first started, Colby is around 2 years old, and I was just 6 when he was elected to the 46th Circuit Court. The same people are here today: myself, my sister, and our mom. My dad has managed to tip the scales on the female-to-male ratio in the family with the addition of 3 grandsons who currently range in age from 7 to 19.
Together, our parents raised 2 successful and mostly well-adjusted daughters. We're not modest, but that's because we learned by example that with enough drive and determination, we can accomplish anything. That passion is important, that you never stop learning, and that sometimes you just need a stiff drink or a nap to gain a new perspective.
Over the last 2 decades, our lives have changed, but in the end, we've all come back together, quite literally. I'm sure we said we would never, ever live in Grayling, and now we all live about 3.5 miles from each other. I think as his daughters, one of the most magical things about our dad has been watching him be a grandfather. The stress he had on the bench is gone. He laughs as much as the kids do. He has time to enjoy life and to spend it with those he loves.
We cheer together at baseball games and dance recitals. We take turns visiting Benjamin at Colorado State. We watch sunsets at the lake. We open stockings on Christmas. Together, we experience all the seasons of life.
This summer marks the official first year of retirement for our dad. It seems fitting to have that coincide with today's ceremony. So here's to a new season, another 20 years of growing, succeeding, and celebrating. We love you, and congratulations on a career and life well earned.
I mean, I gave up a while ago. The video.
Yes. All right, I didn't know I was supposed to
Yeah, usually we have the unveiling before. Yeah, usually we have the unveiling first.
First, we're going to, well, I know.
I'm just going to introduce his grandson.
Unveil the portrait first.
That's what I'm working on doing.
I thought they said you were a good listener.
Son, and they're gonna go over there and they're gonna take the wrap off the picture. The oldest one is Benjamin Henry Thompson. The next oldest one is Jack Finley Chilcote. And the youngest one is Gus Thomas Chilcote. Go do. Don't knock the easel over, that's the thing. You control it. You want me to walk in? Some of this is going on.
Never seen that before.
I'm a decisive person. Haven't you been listening? Chief Justice Clement and Justices of the Michigan Supreme Court, thank you for having us here this afternoon, for hosting this occasion. I appreciate it. I know you're in the middle of trying to finish out the term here before the summer recess, and I'm very conscious of the fact that your time is limited and we've really pushed on it. So I want you to know that my promise to you is that there's nothing I have to say that's going to take more than 2, maybe 3 hours, but that would be about it. And actually, I got to confess to everybody, I have had a terrible time coming up with what I wanted to say, because it's been 40 years since I've stood on this side of any bench anywhere, okay? It's been 14 years since I left the Supreme Court bench, and much longer than that since I left the trial court and the Court of Appeals. So, I don't know what the point of all that was, but I wanted you to know it. And I want the people that are here behind the rail to know, my friends from Grayling, my family, my former colleagues, always colleagues in my mind, that I really very much appreciate your presence here today. It means a lot to me. I've got to be a little careful. The other thing that I have decided sitting there is when you're as far ahead as I am with what's been going on, it's time to quit, right? I mean, how are we going to go any further? So there's a few things I did want to say. One of them is that your presence, all of you, has been so important to me over the last 50 years that I've been a practicing member of the State Bar, because as a lawyer or as a judge, and maybe as somebody you can hear now in this
forum. I didn't bring my hearing aids. I was having a hard time. Your presence and assistance and help and a kind word or a little bit of advice, time to go fishing, whatever, has been extremely important to me. It has never been a solo journey, and it could not be a solo undertaking. And I very much, as I say, appreciate the support that all of you have given me. I was going to introduce my family that's here. It's extensive, and tell you what they did, but I don't believe we have time for that, and they probably don't care. I do want to acknowledge my wife, Sandra K. Shellfish. She's originally from Detroit. I'm from northern Michigan. How did that happen? She happened to be up in northern Michigan with her girlfriends on Halloween weekend. And two of my buddies and I, there were three of us, were walking around downtown Indian River, there's nothing to do, and they pulled up in this car in front of the grocery store and went in, I don't know why. We wanted to be introduced. Somewhere, I don't know where we got it, we got some soap, we soaped the windows in the car. That did start a conversation when they came out. And it turned out that they were up there because one of them, his father, had a fishing joint and he was closing it up. But the girls wanted to go to this place called Club Ponytail over in Harbor Springs, very popular teen place, in the worst way. But they didn't know how to get there. We know how to get there, but we didn't have a car. So this all worked out very well, okay? I graduated from high school the next summer. Sandra Kay was on a different schedule at Cass Tech down in Detroit. She came up, I think, the summer of what, Sandra Kay, 70 what? Quick, 60, not 70. 60 what? We don't see. Around that time, she came up briefly because I thought I had a summer job for her, and that fell apart in about 3 days. She had to go back to Detroit. So I didn't see her again all the way through college. We taught in the Upper Peninsula for a year, didn't see her. Started law school in Detroit. At the end of that year, I was with one of my buddies, as was our custom, after a 10 o'clock get out of school, to go down to the Alcove Bar on Woodward Avenue and have a beer because they were 25 cents a shell. I mean, this is great. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder. Guess who? It was Sandra Kay, and we've been together ever since. 47 years we celebrated last month. Reverend Dawson, who married us, and I want to tell you about that. That was the only time I ever remember in my life when I had to say my vows that I was struck dumb. And it was a frozen, long moment, 2 or 3 minutes. And I remember you, Walt, just kept saying, say the words. Just say the words. Reverend Dawson said that we've been married 44 years, and he was talking in terms of the superlatives of a fine marriage. I think it's appropriate that we have 3 years set aside for the truth of the matter, you know, but we're doing pretty good, okay? When I went to law school in Detroit, and I'm sorry to the family and to the people who have worked for me that I'm not introducing, I do want to remember to say thank you to everybody that's been here today to speak. You've been just very kind to me. I didn't recognize myself in some of it. But when I was in law school in Detroit, for the last year and a half of law school, most of the time I was an inner city teacher around the city, but that last year and a half, I had the good fortune to work for Judge John Fikens, Jules mentioned it, in the Federal District Court in Detroit. And again, coming from northern Michigan, I didn't know any lawyers, I'd never seen any lawyers, I'd never been in a courtroom, didn't know anything about anything. I spent a year and a half with John Fikens. He was a working judge. He believed in keeping the docket moving, in doing the public's business in an appropriate way, and he had an extremely high standard of ethics. And that has held me in good stead all the time since. That was as good as any 4 years of college education, being with that judge at that time. Well, let's see here. Boy, there's so many good things about my family. If you're coming over to the hotel later, I'll give you this and you can look it over. I do want to talk a little bit about my mother. That was mentioned today, and it's absolutely true. We were over in Morton, Illinois this past weekend for her 99th birthday, okay? Her name is Helen Marie Waldron Davis Tull. One more marriage, and I'd have to get out the castanets and start a, okay? She couldn't be here, of course, because even though she's doing well, she's living by herself, a trip of that length by any means would be pretty rugged. But she will see it on YouTube. Hi, Mom, yeah, when it comes out. And she's very, very proud and thankful to all of you for having this. I've got relatives here from Tennessee, Illinois, Georgia, Virginia. Any place else? No. They don't want to say anything. They're afraid they're going to get roped into this. Some people that I've worked with that may or may not be here, I haven't seen them. I saw them on the sheet. That I do want to mention, clearly you've heard from Frank. Frank was my right hand in the appellate world. I was a trial judge. I got as a trial judge to where I said, wait a minute, why am I writing opinions? It's taken a lot of time. It's taken a lot of energy. What I'm going to do is figure out what I'm going to do with the case, and then we record all this stuff, right? If somebody wants to know what the opinion was, get the record. So I would start giving my opinions from the benches. It saved me a lot of time. You all may want to think about that. And I'll tell you what, you may especially want to think about it because your mic system doesn't seem to be working real well. It's the government, I know. So anyway, Ahmad Husana was one of my law graduate, waiting for my bar exam results clerks, and he did a great job for me. He still comes up north. I still see him occasionally, and he's a very active, successful practitioner now down in the Detroit area. Rick McNally was with me in my law practice. Yeah, Rick's back here. My partner, Tom Kent, the only partner I ever had in the business, is here with his wife, Ellen. I got to tell you that story. I knew Tom in Detroit, met him a couple times. He worked over in the recorder's court, but, we didn't see much of each other. When I got up to Grayling, which, by the way, was a town I said I would never go back to again, one night when I drove home from Detroit and had to stop and get gas, and about 11 o'clock at night. And if you've ever been in Grayling, there's no way to get back on the expressway the way you got in there. It's kind of boxed like a rabbit warren or something. So by the time I got done with that, I said, I'm never coming back to this town. I've been there for 50 years now, right? And I met Tom up there in 1960, I keep getting these dates mixed up. In 1975, started practice together, a general practice. We bought an old defunct pool hall and had it remodeled by some guy that knew about remodeling and opened our doors. And the next year, the town fathers had gotten tired of the prosecutor they had. He'd been there a long time and was abusing his office. So we got recruited to run. Tom got the short straw. He had to run, and he won. And that helped us out, put a floor under our business, because the first year, we started in August. When we went home for Christmas, we gave the secretary her pittance. And then we divided the money in the till, which was $70. We each took $35 and went home. Had a great Christmas. But we were never in the red, and we never borrowed money. When he won that office as prosecutor, the guy we kicked out didn't take it kindly. And the next year, he managed to drum up a recall campaign that was on the ballot. And we prevailed in that too, but it was bloody for several months. And as far as I know, it was the only and first recall campaign in the state of Michigan where an elected public official had prevailed in one of those deals. So that was a big deal. It was also enough for Tom and his wife to decide, we don't need this, right? And he decided to go for the bright lights and fast action down in Grand Rapids before there was any of that in Grand Rapids. There wasn't too much. I finished out that term, I promised people, we did promise people that if we won, we'd do it again. So I kept that promise. Here I am, a Democrat, right, running in Crawford County, which is all Republican. And the only reason I was a Democrat was because Tom ran as a Republican, and I went across the street to drum up whatever support I could. The Democratic Party meets in a phone booth up there, okay? So it wasn't hard to remember their names. So I ran, and of course, I knew it was going to be tough. I came home about 8:30 that night after the polls closed, flipped on the TV, and there's Jimmy Carter conceding to Ronald Reagan at 8:30 in the evening. And I thought, ooh, this doesn't look good for me. But I only lost by 100 votes, right? So not so bad. Went back to my private practice. 4 years later, the sitting circuit judge said, hey, the legislature just authorized a second seat in the circuit. Have you ever thought about being a judge? And I did not jump out of my chair and say, oh, just every day since I've been about 12. I didn't do that. But I said, yeah, well, think about it. He said, you're going to be a contested race, 3 counties, but I can help you out. What do you think? I said, well, I don't know, it's serious business. I got to go home and talk to my wife about this, and then I'll get back to you. He said, sure. I left work a little early that day, went home, found Sandra Kay, and said, Sandra Kay, guess what we're going to do, all right? And the race was on from May to November. 3 counties, round and round and round. When it was all done, I had won by 400 votes out of about 14,000 that were cast. And the thing that I find fascinating to this day about that race was that we each spent within $100 of each other on the campaigns. And the campaigns for each of us cost about $17,000. Now try doing that today, okay? When I ran for the Supreme Court in 2010, a man who tries to keep track of that sort of stuff down here post-election in Michigan doesn't make it easy, was up speaking at a forum in Traverse City, and his assessment was that in that 2010 Supreme Court race, which was the first year of Citizens United, all right, my side raised and spent $7 million. Now, I have no idea where that money came from or went, right? And on the other side, the calculation was $15 million. Now, anything like that borders on the obscene, and it's corrosive of the judiciary. And you've heard some of that by other speakers tonight, and it's a serious piece of business. It's something that needs to get fixed, because when that kind of money is sloshing around in a business where people are supposed to be impartial, it does cause the communities and the citizens to say, wait a minute, how can this possibly be? So that's about my only real political comment for the day. Well, let's see, there's all kinds of good stuff in it. I'm going to go fast. Look at all the time I'm saving you. Just hang on a second. I was in this trial court for 21 years. When I was halfway through that 21 years, Justice Jim Brickley came up to Crawford County because the Supreme Court, under his direction, with the authorization and agreement of the other justices, decided that maybe it was time to take a look at how we were doing business in the state of Michigan in the trial court system. And Justice Brickley put it this way when he came to Crawford County to announce the program. He said, if you brought a visitor, a time traveler, back from the 18th century into modern America, and he took a look around, there's only 2 things he'd recognize. One is the service of the Catholic Church, the same, right? And the other is the judiciary. He said, maybe it's time we take a look at what we're doing. Bill Monahan, how are you doing? Good to see you. Bill Monahan and I were in law school together. There were about 5 or 6 of us, and he and I are left. But it's good to see you. So My circuit, the 46th, was the only multi-county circuit in that whole program. That got me started on the business of trying to work with the courts and court modernization, and that really had my interest for the balance of the time that I was on the court, in all of those courts. In 2009 and 10, I chaired a committee along with Jim Alexander from Oakland County and with 25 judges from around the state. And the whole purpose of the committee was to look at what we had done in the judiciary from the beginning since we were a territory up to the present time, what things could be fixed and what things could be done to make it better. That work still goes on today. I'm very proud of that. That's what that piece of paper is supposed to be in that guy's hand over there, is a copy of that report. When I look at that picture, when I first saw it, the guy looks a little stressed out to me. And there he's holding on to this piece of paper. And I thought, oh my God, it's a summons or an eviction notice or something like that. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, I was evicted, right? I mean, so maybe the artist saw something I wasn't thinking about. I'm warming to it a little bit. I'm just about done. I want to say this, and I know I've chopped up this speech, and I'm sorry, but it's been a real mess in my mind ever since I knew I was going to do it. Looking back, there is no part of my legal career that I value more than another. Every part of it, while it was different, was interesting, it was challenging, and an honor and a privilege to be a part of. I have two comments to make about the law. If I got the right glasses on, I don't. Excuse me. Are my reading glasses over there, Cindy King? These will be brief. The first is a statement by a very influential trial lawyer and alumnus of the Detroit College of Law. His name was Harry Philo, and he was practicing in the 1950s. He was a labor lawyer and civil rights lawyer, and very well known. Here's what he said: "Never let us forget that the law is never settled until it's settled right. It's never right until it's just, and it's never just until it serves society to the fullest." I believe that to be exactly correct. The other thing that I would say, based on my observations over this period of time, is that the people do support the law. They understand its value. They will accept its judgments as long as they feel they've been fully heard. The profession needs to be very alert to that, because frequently people think they haven't been fully heard. And when that happens, it generates anger, disrespect, and contempt. And those sentiments, when they are felt, are generally very widely distributed. So I think we all need to keep that in mind. People don't voluntarily come into court. When they are in court, they should have the opportunity to tell you everything they want to tell you before they face a decision. In a few moments, we're going to go downstairs and have some refreshments. We're at that point, thank God, and a chance to visit.
That's my part.
Huh?
That's my part.
Oh, that's your part? Okay, well, I'm not going to say, I just want to. Oh, I'm in trouble now, right? Is this a contempt citation? This is a wonderful Supreme Court. The bench that's here today. All I wanted to say about the refreshments is we'll have a chance to visit, and please make it a point to say hello before you have to leave, okay? If you have to leave anytime soon. And if it's been a while, help me out. I don't want to be driving home saying to Sandra Kay, oh, I had a great conversation with, oh, that's who that was. Okay, and I think you all know about that little problem, right? So help me out. You know how that goes. And Sandra Kay as soon as I be quiet here, guess what we're going to do? We're going to adopt a mantra of the Cajuns at Mardi Gras, which in my imperfect imitation is laissez la bon temps rouler, let the good times roll. And that's what we're going to do starting right now. And finally, and this is finally, I imagine you've all been at a casino at some point, and you may have noticed that the people running the games all do the same thing when their shift is over. And I have noticed that and watched it. I never understood what that was all about. But now I do. Or I think I do. I think that they are required to display to the cameras in the ceiling that the shift is over, they're leaving, and they're not taking anything with them that belongs to the house. Okay? So, thank you. I didn't mean to forget about Reverend Ryan. The stand out there is who's going to introduce you.
Well, for a Jewish guy, I'm trying to figure out the difference between an invocation and a benediction.
As long as you know the difference between a benediction and a eulogy, we're all right.
So we have Reverend James Briney of the United Church of Christ, Oro Valley, Arizona, who's here to participate.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for including me in this ceremony. It is a privilege of ministry and our friendship that I get to do this for you and with you. Nearly 20 years ago, I came from Wisconsin to do the invocation at the Wharton Center when Tom became a member of the Court of Appeals. This time I came from Arizona and opted to do the benediction so I could have the last religious word. Tom, your capacity for friendship, generosity, humility, and integrity is immense. I'm glad I get to know you. Dear God, esteemed members of this court, and all who hear this prayer, I submit that justice will triumph when all are as kind and conscientious as is Emeritus Justice Davis. When the self-righteous become as righteous as my friend and former neighbor, civil discourse will prevail, and the spirit within us that is holy will be revealed. In Alton T. Davis, God blessed creation with an individual who made the most of his talents and opportunities as he applied the law and served justice. When Jesus said, "I'm the way," he was saying, "I'm the way to be the way I am." The way of Tom Davis is to live his faith as his way of life. Throughout his 50-year career, Tom made rulings, wrote opinions that were shaped by impartiality, issued with grace, and imbued with mercy. May we become the souls that God intends for us to be, and a blessing to others, as is the one we have gathered to honor. Amen, and peace be with you.
Well, in closing, first, my apologies to Judge Beckering for not acknowledging you in our opening. Welcome back to the Hall of Justice. We are always excited to see you, as well as to our other colleagues, Judge Doug Shapiro, and I see Judges Laura Mack, Judge Jim Fisher, and Jennifer Faber as well. If I missed, I said Mike Kelly at the beginning. I did not forget that one. If I missed anybody else, it's because I... Thank you, thank you. So thank you to our colleagues on the trial court for, and the Court of Appeals for coming to help us celebrate. Second, Justice Davis, thank you for your service to the people of the state of Michigan and for giving us all an opportunity to celebrate your career today. Thank you all for attending and helping us honor one of our own. We hope you can join us in continuing this celebration during a reception downstairs in the first floor conference center. This special session of the Michigan Supreme Court is adjourned. Thank you.